Tracy again, and wanted to, as the year ends, provide an update on recent pronouncements, rulings, decisions on the seminal question with every token project: is my token a security? Right? And there's this kind of, like, I don't know, belief or, I don't know, fever dream that since the current administration has basically like ended all forms of crypto, enforcement actions and the like outside of like criminal ones, that you can kind of go ahead and do what you want. But I caution people by saying, well, it took the SEC like 5 years to go after most of the early ICO people. So just because they're not doing it now doesn't mean they won't do it later, right? And there's only been one real major case, which is the Terraform Labs. But the SEC has laid out some guidance, right, staff guidance, that gives you some further clarity, right? And again, Howie is still the bellwether. Like, Howie is still, what you have to kind of adhere to, but it's archaic, old, and I've complained about it enough. So anyway, so the three main takeaways as we end 2026 are, based on what the SEC said, is one, the token is purchased, like the intent of the purchaser is not perceived to be for an investment, but to be for like a use case or a product or something like that, right? And that's a hard one to kind of interpret, because how do you know what somebody's thinking? But you can control that messaging with your marketing, which goes to the second point. If you are marketing a token, okay, and your messaging veers in any way, shape, or form from utility and use case to profit potential, right? Even when you're talking about, like, make some illusion or illusory comment to like a secondary market listing, that is going to weigh heavily on whether that token is perceived to be a security or not. So the way I read it is that you could have a very clear use case that offers like basically no, real profit potential outside of the fact that it may get listed even on a DAX, right? Which you kind of don't have any control over to an extent. But you could, as a token holder, potentially profit from price appreciation, irrespective of the elements of that token. You're back to being a security no matter what. And then third, we go back to the entrepreneurial efforts element, right? Which, is baked into Howie, but you saw like in Terraform Labs and a lot of these other cases, the entrepreneurial efforts, right? And what they mean by that is the core group or like promoters, team, whatever you want to call it, who are behind this token or this platform, if they are outwardly running this and managing this platform and token for purposes of profit, right, that would inure to the benefit of the token holder in any way, right? Not something as clear as like we're going to make distributions, which clearly are security, but like going back to like, okay, valuation, right? Like this platform we sold or it'll trade, anything like that, and you're going to fall back and potentially be labeled a security, right? And that one's also very ambiguous because obviously if you're creating like a token project and you have a use case, let's say it's a utility that you can play a game or Web3, whatever it is, well, you're not doing it for your health, right? You're not doing it so what does that mean, right? Obviously you're doing it to make a profit, and sure, that profit may not inure to or benefit the token holders, but it brings me to like my whole point. it's all about what you say, right? It's all about how you market these tokens and what's on everything from your white paper, your website, to your social media, all of it. That's all they're looking at. Okay. The functionality can be very clear, but if the messaging is off, then you're going to fall back into that, that sort of intent qualifier where people think, or at least regulators suggest people thought, I'm getting into this token because I want to make money, right? Not because I want to use it for something or it's a value or something like that. So my advice to anybody, like, going into 26, because the enforcement action will come and you'll get regulatory clarity, hopefully, in terms of what is and isn't a token. But my advice is, and it always has been, go into it, like when you are launching a token, just assume, right? Go from the perspective that the way you have designed the architecture of that token and the platform utility upon which it is to be used will qualify you as a security. So work back from there. Like, reimagine that thought, right? And go, okay. It could be very axiomatic. You drive yourself crazy because you go, well, what the hell? Like, no, I'm like, there's no distributions, there's no secondary markets. Just assume you are, and then reimagine that before you get into like the smart contracts and all that, so you can be deadly serious and deadly accurate in terms of what you're saying, and that will govern and guide you in terms of how you market. And the problem, which I see all the time with marketing these projects, is like, you outsource it, right? And you really need like internal watchdogs, like your compliance people really have to look at that, because even some of the best, right, firms that do crypto marketing, while they veer off script, right? And because they want to do a good job, it may not be intentional. It's certainly not to harm the project, but you got to look at it from the perspective of, well, what if they say something they shouldn't, right? So you have to like be very vigilant about that. But at the end of the day, not a lot has changed, right? But I think the focus is less on, the true utility, right? Because the guidance provided sounds like, to me, if you have what is unequivocally a utility token with the strongest and most clear use case in the world, if your messaging suggests otherwise, it doesn't matter, right? It would not matter. And that's where you're setting yourself up. So that is token as a security, not as a security outlook 2026. I would think that there's going to be further guidance. There really hasn't been anything very recently, but the more they talk about it, maybe that means they'll do something. Who knows? So anyway, adamtracy.io. Hit me up with any questions, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.